Voy a ponernos al aire ya.
Okay.
Hola a todos, Alejandro, Beatriz, Daniel, las personas que se nos van conectando. Eh, nos pueden ir contando en el chat de dónde se nos conectan. Nos emociona mucho tener siempre
Hello, everyone. Alejandro, Beatriz, Gabriel.
tantas
Thank you for being here. You can start telling us
de la región.
where you are connected from. We have different people from different regions.
Vamos a esperar unos 2 minutos
We are going to wait a couple of
para que se
minutes
conecten más personas.
for more people to
Vamos a
connect,
a las
and then we'll
2
start
de la tarde.
at 12:02.
Okay. Just remember there's live interpretation. You can access the translation or the interpretation into English by clicking on the world icon here in the bottom of the screen, here in Zoom. Também hay tradução automática ao português, clicando o mundinho na parte de baixo da janela. O português es muy malo, pero lo intento. Saludos desde México, desde Argentina. Muchas gracias por conectarse.
Greetings from Mexico, from Argentina. Thank you very much for being here.
Bueno. 12:02 de la tarde en Colombia.
Okay, it's 12:02 in Colombia. We're going to start with this session.
Muchas gracias por conectarse al
Hi,
webinar.
everyone. Thank you very much for being here on this webinar.
We have automatic translation of the seminar. Click on the world icon here in the Zoom menu to access the English translation. Temos tradução automática ao português. Clicando no ícone do mundinho abaixo, você pode acessar a tradução. Yo soy Camila Vargas, trabajo para Conecta Américas, la comunidad.
I'm Camila Vargas. I work for Connect Americas. You can connect with more than 700,000 entrepreneurs from the region and the world and get to know some useful tools to expand your business and know the last trends, and everything is totally free. If you don't have a profile on Connect Americas, we invite you to create one. Going to the website connectamericas.com is like very similar to registering in a social media. This is our fourth meeting, Driving Digital Transformation, and especially for SMEs. This event of this week is like the opening for the face-to-face event that will take place in Jamaica, and this is the seventh and last session of our financial inclusion for SMEs. Today we finished this cycle of 7 sessions in which we have been talking about funding alternatives. We've been talking about what the fintech companies are. We've been talking about software for financial management, for international payments, funding. And this event is organized from the Institute for Latin American Integration in town with a lot of affection for the SMEs. Today we have Elsa Gomez. She's the sales officer of Exponential Confirming. She's an economist, specialist in marketing management. She works also on companies development. She's an entrepreneur, and she works for Exponential Confirming, and she works mostly on liquidity. So she will give us a masterclass in order to learn how to fund our businesses. So I'm going to give the floor to her. Thank you very much for being here. Hello, good afternoon. How are you? Okay, as I was saying before, I am Elsa Gomez. I am part of the Exponential Confirming team. We are a fintech platform, a negotiation platform. And I'm going to talk about liquidity today through the electronic invoices. You can have anticipated liquidity in your services. So I'm going to start telling you a little bit about this. There are many liquidity mechanisms, many different tools. Here I'm going to mention some of them that might be very useful in your everyday transactions, depending on the moment of the company and your needs. So liquidity is defined as the capacity or the ability that a company has to face its obligations at a short term. And today, liquidity in a company is needed for everything, basically, to pay the payroll, to buy raw materials, to pay the fixed actives, rent, taxes, etc. So it includes many things. And sometimes people wonder, how do I do to guarantee that I have enough money to be able to pay for all those things? And this fluidity of the liquidity is what makes that our companies are able to survive in a crisis moment, because that's what it represents, the cash health. Since the pandemic, many things started to change. And sometimes the SMEs think of a very short term, but I'm gonna tell you a little bit more in detail. So I'm gonna start with some recommendations in order to manage liquidity. And here we have 4 aspects. The first one, we need to have a look at the tools I'm using now. Do we have credits? Do we have loans? First thing we have to do is to check if those loans that I have are recent or if they come from past periods. Depending on that, for example, if they are of past periods, I want to think of how to consolidate the payment of some debts. Or if I have an old credit with very high rates, and well, things change according to the situation, according to the scheme that we have selected with the corresponding loan. Another one is to ask if we have corporate credit cards, and with these credit cards, we have to check also what kind of expenses we are using them for. Because even though it's a mechanism that can work for liquidity at the short term, sometimes people use them for different kinds of expenses, and it's not right. Another topic is to evaluate if, as a company, we have another capital alternative that is different from the traditional banks. For example, we can ask for loans to natural people or legal persons that are close to us, and we have to see at what cost. That's an emergency alternative. And something else is that we have to check if we are using liquidity alternatives, new liquidity alternatives. I say new because when a SMEC starts and it's work capital, they think of credits and loans. It's like the idea that comes to everybody's mind. But yeah, everybody thinks that they need a credit, and well, they are more or less prepared for the requirements in order to get it. But there are some other different alternatives like factoring, leasing, and ranking. So regarding those liquidity needs of the everyday life and the financial loads, we talk about the taxes, payroll, rents, raw materials, and we need to find a balance, but it all depends on the kind of company, the situation the company it is in, the projects of expansion, if they want to reach different markets. So depending on that, we start like playing with all these elements. So I'm gonna talk about some of these tools that might be out in the market. And as I mentioned before, we have the traditional or digital credits, but there are other alternatives that are 100% technological. You can have access to this experience from anywhere in the world. Okay, so apart from the traditional credits, we have, or traditional loans, we have the digital loans. There are a lot of lending platforms now, and they are also divided into segments to approve online loans for consumption or for the SMEs. The study is a little bit more specialized, but fintechs work with segments, and as I said before, they work 100% online, and they are developed to help specific sectors. That's an advantage compared to the traditional banking. For example, if you have 400 or 500 products, the traditional banks cannot reach to some particularities, and the fintechs can. So first thing you have to know is, why do you need the credit, or what do you need it for, and for how long? For example, you're thinking about machinery, it should be a long term loan. If it's for work capital, it has to be a short term, 10 years or something. If it's for machinery, well, you can make it short. It depends. It depends on each situation. But for work capital, the recommendation is that it is a short term. You also need to take into account the margin and rotation of your actives, like accounts receivable, and this allows you to have the ability to pay for a loan. The difference with a digital credit is that the customer can do this on internet from anywhere in the world. There isn't a single physical process. You don't have to deliver or hand in any documents physically, any hard copies. So you just go to the website, you enter your information, the basic information. There are some websites that have scores online, and you start all the process like that. So it's much faster, and getting the money is much faster too. There are many platforms in the market. In Colombia, we have Simply, Finactiva, and many others. And in each different countries, in different countries, there are different ones that are also very famous and very active. Because before, having the study for to get in order to get the loan, and well, it was a long process. It took a long time. And there is a lot of I don't know, like suspicion about like who's getting the loan and if they are gonna be able to pay the money. So the digital loans are there, and they are an option depending on the variables that I mentioned for the companies as an alternative to have liquidity. And this is a very good option. Another alternative we have today, it's the corporate credit cards that can also be used when you have a SMEC, like for a first credit experience. It's a good idea. Because the behavior of the SMEC is evaluated from the beginning with the with the fintech. Different fintech are offering the credit cards with the, beneficial conditions because they make the right use, the proper use of them, and the conditions are more flexible than in the traditional banking. It's funding at zero cost or a short term, for example, to pay your providers. But the idea is not to use the funding for more than 30 days. And this is a very good alternative, which is easy to access depending on the moment, that your company is going through. So here I have three important things: the administration cost of the card, that's usually zero, have the right limits, and to have the capacity of payment in 30 days. I'm going to talk a little bit about two aspects, and it is where I have most experience, which is a platform of invoice negotiation. Factoring, it's another alternative. Many SMEs before ask, okay, how do I make my invoice become like a document of value? And I call this the trapped cash flow, because it's the raw material you need in order to create your product. And sometimes it takes a long time to get those resources. So in the factoring world, and now with the electronic invoicing, you can say that that factoring is the alternative of access to liquidity number one in the world to get work capital in a very fast way, because the invoices are like cash, trapped cash flow. And today with Radian, an invoice is a document that has value, so you can sell the invoice to any person. You can use them for many things, buying supplies or anything. And with Radian, the invoice becomes like a title, a document that has value. I can sell it to anyone in the market. So I need to take into account that there are some delays and how to anticipate it and when. When I anticipate an invoice, I will have some financial cost because it's not a loan and it's not a debt, because I'm just shortening the delay to get the resource. And yeah, of course, I'm gonna have to pay some money. The invoice is in pesos. I pay some, I don't know, like some kind of money. If I need 100 pesos, then I have to pay 3 pesos. And then I get the resources that I need. This is a very used mechanism. Sometimes the SMEs told me, no, if I do that, the customer is going to think that I am broke or that I don't have the resources. There were a lot of taboos around this, but finally, when the customer understands what the factoring is about, then it became a recurring tool for the SMEs. So after Radian, with the resolution 0085, all the electronic invoices must be on Radian. Radian is a platform that has all the traceability of what's happening with that electronic invoice through a unique code. And if you're gonna give that invoice to someone else, um, you will have like a notification, and then you'll see that the invoice was sold to a financial entity, and then it will have to be paid there or to the person you sold it to. So factoring is a good option, but then you need an electronic invoice. Through that electronic invoice, you can go to a lot of platforms and use a system that was enabled by Radiant. And with that electronic invoice, you go to the platform, you fill in some information where people online also say, look, I have this invoice. They go through some validation. They evaluate the risk of the SMEC that is issuing that invoice. So for example, if you have an invoice for 100 million pesos, then Laura is going to, a woman is going to evaluate this day to pay this invoice, then it is uploaded in the platform. And when someone wants to anticipate it, you're gonna find different offers, different proposals that will tell you, look, for that 100,000 invoice, I'm gonna charge you this amount of money. If the customer accepts the offer and says, okay, yes, I'm gonna accept this because this is the liquidity I need today, so I need to pay my employees. So if the offer is accepted, you go to Radiant, you go to the invoice, and finally, once the invoice is in Radiant, you get the money the same day, and that has an advantage. You have sometimes providers that respect the delays, some others that are not, that don't pay on time. So you can use that money to solve that problem, because you cannot call your client or your customer and ask them, hey, can you anticipate the invoice to me, please, or pay in advance? So you don't need to do that anymore. So the factoring, which is 1-to-1 with invoices of different customers, go through that process. They become like a document that has a lot of value. So first you need to have the invoice, then second you need to have your service very clear. The customer uses some platforms as ours, and as we know, that is natural within the model with a mandate from the provider. Then once it becomes like a document of value, it can be negotiated. So that's how factoring works. So you get the money same day, and that is registered in Radiant. And they are going to check your payment capacity. But if you have a AAA customer who is the one who's going to pay the invoice, and then anticipating the invoice, you get to have the liquidity that you need because you are anticipating the actives or the assets. Sorry. Another similar tool is when we talk about confirming. In confirming, it's like a different process, like the opposite process. Many companies say, look, I have a lot of providers, and within all those providers I have, they call me to tell me, look, I have an invoice. Can you play it in advance, please? Some of them won't have like the quota or the money to pay in advance. So they say, Okay. Financial entities, for example. I'm talking about like big company. They say, look, I have 1,000 providers. So financial companies, as I am a big company, you give me a preferential rate, and I need like a loan of 50,000 million pesos, because there are providers that need to pay their bills, or to get the payment of their bills in advance. And as we're talking about like very important unknown companies, I say, okay, I want my providers to be able to anticipate and to benefit of that rate without having to do anything. So it is when we talk about confirmed invoices. That means that the customer is confirming all the financial entities that he is the debtor of those services and that he is going to pay for them. When we have that clarity, the interest rates or the financial cost that providers assume is smaller, because the risk is smaller, because the customer says, under my capacity, I'm going to assume that amount of money for the loan, and that works. So you can anticipate the payment of your invoices like that too. And there's like a specialized team usually in charge of the provider, saying, looking for a different way to help him. Platforms like ours, based on technology, what we do is that every day at dawn, we go to the ERP of the customer. For example, Argos. I check the Argos ERP every single morning at dawn. So I bring all the invoices available that they have there for a customer, so that if they pay them at 30, 45, 90 days, if I just make a call and the invoice is paid in 60 days, then of course I take that option. So I have like in my account balance, I have 1,000 million pesos. So what I do is to select invoices, I send them to the sales card. I put them in Radian, and then, okay, Radian verifies, and they become a title of value or a document of value. And if you have some banks that give you some kind of rates, like La Vivienda or any other bank, and then you accept and you receive the payment of those invoices once they are endorsed. So you started looking at the invoices at 6 a.m. and then at 11 p.m. Sorry, at 11 a.m. or a bit later, you can start getting the money. So I can program for this kind of payments for all everyday needs. I know if I know that every at the end of the month or in the middle of the month, I run short of money, then I can do that. I can use this kind of payments online. Or if I was waiting for a payment and it didn't happen, then you just anticipate your invoices. The companies anticipate the invoice. So for example, if it's due on the 30th, then you can start doing this on the 25th. There are companies that from day first, they need to anticipate the invoice. So with this method, there aren't any restrictions as it would happen in the traditional banking. It depends on the structure of your company and on the company's needs also. So basically, through platforms and negotiations done on Radian, you can have access through your invoices. You can anticipate your invoices and not, you don't have to wait until it is due. It's an automatic load. You don't have to bring your invoice, but you see all the invoices of your customers loaded. There's payment capacity every time because there is an established rate. They are endorsed automatically. The platform, the fintech platforms do all those things very, very fast. And another benefit is that you get the money the same day and you have preferential rates. You are the money is disbursed the same day you ask for it with a good rate. So those are mechanisms that we can take advantage of. Of course, thinking of what the company needs. There are many alternatives, starting from the loans, credit card, factoring, confirming, or this I'm going to mention here. Well, I'm going to mention some frequent doubts. Like, for example, who can I sell an invoice to? Today in Colombia and in most of the countries
título o valor, yo se la puedo vender a un tercero.
where the bills can become like a document of value, you can sell the invoice to any person, to a third party, to a bank, to a juridic person. And okay, to negotiate an invoice, what events must be registered on Radian? The bills must have minimum 2 events. The first one, acknowledgement of reception of the invoice and of the product of our service. And event number 3, from exponential, we can generate by the provider. And number 3 is like to start working with the date of my invoice from the day it is issued. It's not necessary. Now I'm going to talk about alternatives for cash flows, cash flow issues. The leasing is one of them. It's financial activity or a contract where the leasing company gives my company some asset. It doesn't give me resources, but it gives me something that I need, like a machine, a computer, a vehicle, etc. Everything is the asset that I am needing. And in exchange, I need to pay some amount of money on a regular basis in order to cover the corresponding expenses. When it is due, there are 2 alternatives: that it becomes part of the leasing company, or that me as a company, I have a small value and pay so that that asset starts being part of my company. So those are different alternatives when you think about liquidity for the company. These are not the only ones, of course. There are many others that can be explored. But basically, as a conclusion of this presentation, is depending on the company's phase and its needs, it can have a mix of alternatives as the ones I just mentioned, and not just stay with one of them. You have to be monitoring your numbers and the 4 aspects we saw in the beginning to know when to go from factoring to a loan or another mechanism that you consider more convenient. You can constantly be checking the different options, the rates, if they go down, if they go up, but always you have to consider different alternatives always. Checking your numbers in order to, how to go from factoring or a loan
o incluso
to another mechanism or a different alternative.
liquidez en el patrimonio y bueno, un nuevo inversionista o ese tipo de cosas, ¿cierto? Yo pienso que es
I
depende de
think
la
that
etapa y el
depending
momento en que
on the moment
empresa
the
que
company is in,
debemos estar como
we
alerta.
need to be
Ahora, si
alert
quieres
and
querías
make
preguntar
decisions,
algo,
informed decisions. That's what I wanted to tell you today. I don't know if you have any questions.
Bueno, Elsa, muchísimas gracias por tu
Thank you,
presentación.
Elsa, for your presentation.
Es importante recordar
I
que
think it's important to
muchos de los
remember
ejemplos y
that
también
most of the
los
examples
comentarios al respecto de la
and the
legislación
comments regarding the legislation
son aplicables para Colombia,
are
pero
applicable for Colombia,
que el
but
caso sea
it's
distinto
possible that
en los diferentes países.
it is a different situation
Entonces,
in different
es
countries.
importante como recordar
So
eso.
it's important to remember
Tenemos
that.
varias preguntas
We don't
en el
have
chat. Nos preguntan
many
por El
questions,
Salvador,
but we have one from
Jamaica.
Jamaica.
Me imagino que Exponencial Confirming no opera en Jamaica, pero si usted
Exponential
conoce
Confirming
alguna
doesn't operate in
compañía en
Jamaica, I
Jamaica,
imagine. But
en
if
el
you know
Caribe, que nos
about
pueda
any
contar.
company in the Caribbean that you
No,
can tell us
de
about,
muchas,
no,
muchas fintech, pero en
Mm,
Jamaica puntualmente no lo tengo en este dato, pero también
no,
te lo
no.
puedo contar. Pero
I
sí
have
hay
no
varias
idea really, but
compañías en proceso de abrir, no solo estar en Colombia, sino en Latinoamérica, en otros
there are
países.
many
De
companies
hecho,
that are in the
tenemos
process of opening
oficina
in
en
Latin
México
America and I guess
y
in the
ya hay
Caribbean too.
operaciones también en República Dominicana, en Costa Rica,
There are
Panamá,
some of them
y van a
opening in
empezar
Dominican
a
Republic, Costa
ciertos
Rica, and
países
Panama. They will
que no
start
solo están
expanding.
en Latinoamérica, sino en todo el mundo.
Sí, perfecto.
Ujú.
Nos preguntan, para una empresa que no es de productos, sino de
For a
servicios,
company that is not a product company, but a service company,
como, ¿cuál sería, o sea, si han tenido experiencia ustedes brindando factoring
have you
a
had
estas
experience
empresas de
with these
servicios?
companies
Porque
giving factoring?
la persona que pregunta nos dice que hay
Because the person
personas
who
que con los
asked
bancos de pronto no
says
es
that
tan
with the
sencillo el
banks,
tema, ya que los
it's
bancos
not
son
very
infalibles,
simple.
no hay como un inventario que
They
respalda
don't have an
la
inventory that,
inversión.
that
Pero como así
acts as a
como
collateral of the
referencia,
investment.
ejemplo, para lo que
Yes.
estamos hablando del factoring y del confirming es
Well,
una factura, ¿cierto?
what
Una
really
factura
matters
que
for the
se tiene
factoring is to
que
have the
presentar
invoice. If you have an
cuando hay un
invoice
deudor que efectivamente
and
tiene
there's a
derecho a
debtor,
pagar, pues digamos que con eso ya tienes el anticipo
you can
de la
have
factura y obtienes
the
la factura
anticipation
y
of
puedes
that
esperar al vencimiento. Esa es una
invoice.
ventaja, o sea, para el tema de servicios ahí no hay como una restricción, sino
So
que
for
puedes
the
pagar
topic of
cuando
services, there
necesites.
isn't any
Si tienes una
restriction.
factura,
They pay at
bien,
30,
si
60, or
quieres
90
anticiparla
days.
hoy día cero y no me quieres pagar
And
los
if you
días
want to
cero,
anticipate it
sin
today,
problema.
that's not a problem.
Perfecto, mil gracias.
Ujú.
Entonces, en conclusión, no importa si eres una empresa
Okay.
de productos o
So the
servicios,
conclusion, it doesn't matter if you're a company, a product
o
company or a service
que la
company,
factura pues cumpla con
you
la
need the
legislación local,
invoice,
porque
and the
como
invoice needs
estamos
to
hablando ya nos está diciendo
meet the requirements and the legislation of your
dependiendo del
country.
país en el que esté,
And depending on the
puede
country you
requerir
are in, you will have
diferentes
different
cantidades.
needs, but
Nos pregunta también
it
Gustavo
works like
si
that.
existe algún
Gustavo
límite
asks
máximo en el
if
monto de
there is a
facturas.
maximum or minimum in
Digamos
the
que
amount of the
en
invoices. No,
confirming se
no.
anticipan facturas
In
de 10,000
exponential,
pesos.
we
¿Ya?
anticipate
Si yo digo,
invoices of
ya, uno que dice,
10,000
bueno,
pesos, which is like
imagine que un ejemplo puede ser
$2,
100 millones,
$3.
200 millones de pesos, 100 millones, no. Cuando uno entra en
Can be also
confirming,
100 million
se
pesos.
tiene
It
como
doesn't matter the
facturas de
amount.
100,000 pesos que se anticiparon. ¿Por qué? Porque
We've
pues
had
los
anticipated invoices of
bancos
100,000
necesitan
pesos,
que necesitamos para pagar
around
cosas básicas y que estaba como
um,
una solución de emergencia.
$20. So yeah,
Totalmente,
Ujú.
es relativo siempre el monto
it's
de las
relative.
facturas.
The amount of the
Nos preguntan
invoices
también
is
como
relative.
de curiosidad, ¿los fondos se encuentran en los
The
bancos
funds
o son fondos
you find
exponencial
in the
confirming los que se
banks
utilizan para el
or
pago?
they are in exponential confirming.
Nuevamente hay fondeadores, las entidades financieras
We have
vinculadas
funders
y también Exponencial tiene en algunos casos parte de
and
fondeo propio. Pero digamos que
exponential has like some
tenemos
funds, some,
la capacidad de una
yeah,
entidad
our
financiera
own
que sea
funds.
mucho más grande
But of course, the
que
capacity
esta. Entonces lo que hacemos
of
nosotros es
a
colocamos
bank
algunos pequeños
or a
fondos
financial company will
y a
always be
veces las negociaciones son
much
tan
bigger.
grandes
Sometimes because the
y muy
negotiations
estrictos
are extremely
que
big
algunos cupos se
and
quedan
there are
afuera.
some
Entonces uno como que tiene una bolsita chiquitica
days in which there are
y
so many
no deja
transactions that
recibir
is
esas
really
entidades.
difficult
Pero normalmente
to
los
have the
digamos el
funds.
99.9%
But I would say the
son entidades
99.9%
financieras y el resto
is
sí
through
es
financial
disposición propia.
entities.
preguntan también si el deudor está en el
Someone is
extranjero,
asking if the
algún país
debtor
colombiano
is
cuyos proveedores en el extranjero ustedes operan
in a
igual.
different country. Do you operate like that? I mean, you can help? Yes, there are some users that are enabled. If the person that is going to do the transaction is outside the country, but the invoice is from here, from Colombia, then they have to create a dynamic password and they can start with the transaction in any part of the world.
Pero creo que se referían a la empresa deudora, o sea,
But I
la
think they meant
empresa
the
emitió la
the
plata.
company that
Uy, yo soy
owes
una
the money.
colombiana que vende zapatos y mi cliente
For
está en
example, a
Estados
Colombian
Unidos
company
y
that
yo lo que quiero
sells
es recoger
shoes, but the customer is in the United States and I want to
¿Ustedes se
pick
lo
up
devuelven?
the invoice, but you will buy it? Well, we have many things to check. If we establish a mechanism for the resources to be transferred, yeah. The most complex thing is that the invoices debtor confirms the payment. So in those cases, I think, yeah, I think we've had things like that because if the debtor confirms, then yeah, we can do it.
Súper, súper. O sea, la respuesta corta es sí, esto nos sirve para
Okay,
operaciones
so the short answer is yes.
en ese caso, perfecto.
Okay, perfect.
¿Qué pasa si el cliente no paga a tiempo?
What happens if the customer doesn't pay on time or if he simply doesn't pay? Okay, in the factoring case, which, when you confirm, when you do the confirming, it's different. So Argos has like some quota, some limit. And for you, it's transparent because you weren't checked about anything. It was the company Argos that went through the verification. So it was his customer that put his quota at your disposition. When you use factoring, there is a double study. You study the condition. For example, you were reported, then there was a study. In the study, they decided that they could give you like an X amount of money. There is a signature of digital documents. If at the moment the payment is due, the customer doesn't pay, because you anticipated it, but the customer doesn't pay. So the first instance is to notify the customer. So, hey, your invoice is due and you haven't paid. It might be that he forgot about it and then he pays next day. But in the moment when he says, from the moment when he says, okay, I need more time, and the interests after the disbursement are assumed by the provider. And in many cases, the provider says, okay, yeah, I'm going to assume them because, yeah, I can do that. But those are agreements you have with your customer. You can assume that, but then after that, you can charge the money in a different way.
Súper. A ver, brindan la opción a empresas de Costa Rica que venden servicios. A ver, nos preguntan desde Costa Rica para servicios de
People from
outsourcing en
Costa
Estados Unidos.
Rica
Yo creo que
ask to do outsourcing in the United States.
la regla del pulgar o como lo general con exponencial confirming, me imagino
The
que
general thing with exponential confirming
por lo menos una de las partes
is
tiene que estar
that
acá.
at least one of the parties has to be in Colombia, right? Yes, so far.
Ahora en eso,
Yes.
ya se están expandiendo.
Yeah, we are expanding, but so far we're in Colombia.
Ahora a final del día que van a recibir su correo.
So at the end of the day, you will get the recording of this presentation with all the slides that were presented and with an article as a summary of what was presented in this session. You will also get a catalog with the 2,600 fintechs in Latin America and the Caribbean, where you can look for type of service. So you can look for factoring, for example, if that's what you're interested in, to see which are the companies, or what the companies that are operating in your countries are, so that you can make use of these services. We have another question. We already talked that there is a minimum or maximum amount. But is there any kind of restriction regarding dates? If they are invoices that are due very soon?
Depende. Primero, siempre
That
que se
depends.
anticipa una factura, no puede estar de contado, ¿cierto? Esa es como la primera condición. Que
First, if
no
you want to anticipate an
en
invoice,
el
it
caso
cannot be
de realidad, por ejemplo, el caso de Colombia,
in
antes era
cash.
descontado y no pasaba nada, pues que todavía no existía la norma, pero ahora, si la emitió de contado y era a plazo, la tiene que corregir, o sea, así no se puede. Y que si falta
So it cannot
3 días
be
hábiles para
just
vencer,
on one payment. It can be
no pasa
like
nada, la
delayed
tiene que
to
usted
different
pagar,
payments.
faltando 3 días y necesita la plata
But
ya,
if you want to
usted la
anticipate
paga.
it like
Ya
3
cuando la
days
factura se
before
vence,
the
ahí es donde
date due,
nosotros
then it can be
estamos
possible to
haciendo
do that.
como desarrollos para negociar facturas
We have
vencidas. Yo, por ejemplo, pago una
created
factura vencida, no pasa
some
nada.
like
Mínimo
modalities
en factoring
to
la
work
puedo
with
pagar,
the
pero
invoices that
estamos
are
revisando porque
due
también en el
already.
mercado
But we're checking
hay
because
mucha empresa, ¿cierto?
it's a
Entonces
market
ahí va a ser
that
un poco el
is
desarrollo.
a bit complicated, but we need to do some more research and more development about it. We are asked about the risk of the exchange rate. We were talking about an operation where the customer of the where the debtor is in the United States, the invoice is in dollars. Exponential confirming what rate and what rate are you paying?
En dólares, pues no te puedo.
Well, no, as we don't work in dollars, I cannot answer that question. We work in Colombian pesos. Okay, so that option is not possible, not available. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, to connect to this session. I'm going to share with you in the chat log the link. This is our final meeting, but we haven't finished the week of outsource to lag. So we are going to talk about the storytelling tomorrow, but I'm going to share the link with you so that you fill in the form to have a certificate of participation in this presentation. You will get the certificate if you participated in at least 80% of the sessions of financial inclusion. So please fill in the form and you can get the certificate from 30 of June on. Thank you very much, Elsa, for this presentation and for telling us a little bit more about the products as Exponential confirming offers and for all these strategies, opportunities, and challenges that we are facing. People are very happy. Everybody's saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Very interesting, very important. So you know, you can look for Elsa on LinkedIn or Exponential Confirming, and also be welcome to the Conecta Americas community. You can join and you can keep on participating in this kind of events. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.